Most people know Jeffrey Dean Morgan for one role, Negan, the man with the leather jacket, the barbed wire bat, and one of the most shocking entrances in television history. But if that's all you know about Jeffrey Dean Morgan, then you only know the final chapter. Because long before he became one of Hollywood's most recognizable actors, he was a young man chasing a completely different dream. He wasn't trying to become an actor. He wanted to be a professional basketball player. Then, in a single moment, that dream disappeared. No backup plan, no Hollywood connections, no clear direction, just a life that suddenly had to start over. Years later, after struggling through countless auditions and small television roles, someone he trusted told him something no actor ever wants to hear. His own manager looked him in the eye and said she didn't believe his career could be saved. The very next day, everything changed. What followed wasn't just a Hollywood comeback. It was a story of reinvention, resilience, and unexpected opportunities that transformed an almost forgotten actor into one of television's most unforgettable stars. And along the way, Jeffrey Dean Morgan built a life that turned out to be far more remarkable than any character he has ever played, long before millions of people knew him as Negan. Jeffrey Dean Morgan had a completely different vision for his future. Hollywood wasn't part of the plan. Acting wasn't even on the list. Growing up in Kirkland, Washington, Morgan was known less for performing and more for competing. He played multiple sports, but basketball was the one he truly loved. By high school, he had become the captain of his basketball team, earned scholarship opportunities, and believed the game would shape the rest of his life. For a while, everything pointed in that direction. He enrolled at Skagit Valley College, determined to take the next step toward a professional basketball career. Then, almost overnight, it was over. A serious leg injury ended the only future he had ever imagined. The sport that had defined his identity since childhood was suddenly gone, leaving him without a clear purpose or backup plan. For many people, that might have been the end of the story. For Jeffrey Dean Morgan, it became the beginning of a completely different one. Instead of chasing another sport, he picked up a paintbrush. He began creating artwork and selling his paintings at local music venues around Seattle. His friends were musicians, and while they performed on stage, Morgan quietly sold his art to anyone willing to buy it. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him something he desperately needed, a new direction. Then came another unexpected twist, a trip to Los Angeles that was supposed to last only a weekend. He wasn't moving there to become an actor. He was simply helping a friend relocate. But somewhere during that visit, life changed course again. Without a long-term plan, without years of preparation, Jeffrey Dean Morgan stumbled into acting almost by accident. And although he didn't realize it at the time, that accidental decision would eventually change his life forever. For most actors, getting the first role is the hardest part. For Jeffrey Dean Morgan, it was getting people to remember his name. After arriving in Los Angeles, acting wasn't something he had spent years preparing for. He simply discovered he enjoyed it, and more importantly, that he had a natural ability for it. That was enough to convince him to stay and give Hollywood a chance. His first film roles came in 1991, opening the door to an industry that offered opportunity, but no guarantees. Over the next decade, Morgan worked steadily, appearing in television shows like ER, JAG, Walker, Texas Ranger, Sliders, Angel, CSI, Monk, Star Trek Enterprise, and The OC. He was becoming the kind of actor audiences recognized without knowing exactly where they'd seen him before. In Hollywood, that's a difficult place to be. You have enough work to survive, but not enough success to truly arrive. Every new role meant starting over. Every audition was another chance to prove himself. Years passed, yet the breakthrough everyone hopes for never came. Then came the moment that nearly ended everything. Morgan later revealed that the manager he considered a genuine friend finally sat him down and admitted something painful. She didn't believe she could resurrect his career. After years of trying, she decided to walk away. For many actors, hearing those words from someone who believed in them would have been enough to quit. But then something happened that felt almost impossible. The very next day, Morgan landed the role of Denny Duquette on Grey's Anatomy. Around the same time, he was also cast as John Winchester in Supernatural and Judah Botwin in Weeds, 3 major television roles on 3 different networks, all within the same period. It was the kind of turnaround no one could have predicted. The actor Hollywood had almost given up on was suddenly everywhere, and for the first time in his career, people weren't just recognizing his face. They were finally remembering his name. Landing 3 major television roles changed Jeffrey Dean Morgan's career, but one of them changed his life. In 2005, Morgan appeared as Denny Duquette on Grey's Anatomy, a heart transplant patient whose quiet optimism and heartbreaking love story with Izzy Stevens quickly became one of the show's most emotional storylines. Audiences knew Denny's future was uncertain, but that only made them more invested in his character. When the writers eventually killed him off, the reaction was so overwhelming that the show later brought him back in dream sequences and flashbacks because fans simply couldn't let him go. Almost overnight, Jeffrey Dean Morgan stopped being that actor you've seen somewhere. He became Denny. At the same time, another audience was discovering him in a completely different role. On Supernatural, he played John Winchester, the determined father whose disappearance set the entire series in motion. Although he appeared in only a limited number of episodes, his presence shaped the story long after he was gone, making him one of the show's most important characters. Then there was Weeds, where he portrayed Judah Botwin, adding yet another memorable performance to an already remarkable year. 3 networks, 3 completely different characters, 3 performances that proved Jeffrey Dean Morgan wasn't just versatile, he was unforgettable. Hollywood had finally taken notice. Film roles soon followed. He appeared in P.S. I Love You, starring alongside Hilary Swank, before taking on one of his darkest performances as the comedian in Zack Snyder's Watchmen. The morally complex anti-hero allowed Morgan to showcase a side of his acting audiences had rarely seen, proving he could carry complicated, deeply flawed characters with equal conviction. By 2009, Jeffrey Dean Morgan had earned something every actor hopes for: respect. Not because he was the biggest star in Hollywood, but because he had become the kind of actor directors trusted. It seemed like his career had finally reached its peak. But the role that would define his legacy was still waiting for him. By the middle of the 2000s, Jeffrey Dean Morgan had built something every working actor dreams of: a respected career, steady film roles, television success, and a reputation for delivering memorable performances. But despite all of that, he still wasn't a global icon. That changed on April 3, 2016. When Jeffrey Dean Morgan made his first appearance as Negan in The Walking Dead, television audiences were introduced to a character unlike any they had seen before. Leather jacket, a confident smile, and a barbed wire baseball bat named Lucille. Within minutes, Negan delivered one of the most controversial scenes in modern television, killing a beloved character in a moment so brutal that it immediately divided the show's audience. Some viewers praised the series for staying faithful to the original comics, while others were so disturbed by the episode that they stopped watching altogether. Morgan later acknowledged that if there was one moment he could change, it would be that scene, not because he regretted the performance, but because he believed it cost the series a great deal of goodwill with its audience. But something unexpected happened over the seasons that followed. Negan refused to remain a one-dimensional villain. As the story evolved, viewers saw glimpses of guilt, loss, humor, and eventually redemption. The man audiences once loved to hate slowly became one of the show's most layered and fascinating characters. It was a transformation that required Jeffrey Dean Morgan to balance menace with vulnerability, proving that Negan was far more than a comic book villain. The role became the defining performance of his career. Even after The Walking Dead ended its original run, Morgan continued playing Negan in the spin-off The Walking Dead, Dead City, helping carry one of television's most recognizable characters into a new chapter. He later expanded his resume with projects including The Boys and voice work in Invincible, showing that his career was still evolving decades after his accidental start in Hollywood. For many actors, landing an iconic role becomes the end of the story. For Jeffrey Dean Morgan, it allowed him to build something even more meaningful away from the cameras, because the greatest success of his life had nothing to do with Hollywood. Looking back, it's easy to believe Jeffrey Dean Morgan's career was always heading toward success, but that's only because we already know how the story ends. What we don't see are the moments that could have changed everything. The basketball injury that erased his first dream, The years spent playing characters few people remembered, the manager who believed his career had reached its limit, and the countless auditions that never became headlines. If any one of those moments had ended differently, there might never have been a Denny Duquette, a John Winchester, or a Negan. But perhaps the most surprising part of Jeffrey Dean Morgan's story isn't the fame he eventually found. It's what he chose to build once he had it. Away from Hollywood, he created a quieter life with Hillary Burton on a farm in New York, raising their children, caring for animals, and even helping save a small-town candy shop alongside actor Paul Rudd after the previous owner passed away. It was a life that looked nothing like the dark, intimidating characters audiences knew him for. Maybe that's why Jeffrey Dean Morgan's journey feels so different from so many Hollywood success stories. He never followed a carefully planned roadmap. He adapted again and again and again, from a basketball player to a painter to a struggling actor to one of television's most unforgettable faces. His story reminds us that sometimes the greatest opportunities aren't the ones we spend years chasing. They're the ones we never expected to find. And perhaps that's the real reason you'll never see Jeffrey Dean Morgan the same way again.